there is one game we all play, and that game is called real life. Not everyone is good at it, but some of us are. Real life is an open world game with endless possibilities. And after all, only the uncultured spend their day-to-day life in just one country. So join me in my life of leisure as I explore the best games for the handheld around the world. So, the final time I used my video camera on my trip was in Roswell in New Mexico. New Mexico is a US state, by the way, and not the capital of Mexico, like some of you idiots would believe. Speaking of idiots, many people now believe that an alien spaceship once crashed in this town. Some of these American people will believe bloody anything. Ridiculous lies as well, like the NES saving the video game industry, Iraq actually having weapons of mass destruction, and the USA being the best place to live in the whole world. Such lies! This town is absolutely hilarious! Everything is bloody alien themed. Alien stores, alien takeaways, even McDonald's is in the shape of a UFO. Because, you know, capitalism. But most notably of all, this town even has an alien museum. But good luck to Roswell, I suppose. They have created a draw. The town should essentially be a completely pointless place in the middle of nowhere. It may be all very cheap, tacky and lowbrow looking, but if it wasn't for aliens, this town may just as well be Tilbury in Essex or something. Anyway, speaking of ancient f***ing aliens, today we are going to be looking at some of the Game Boy Space Invader games. Yeah! If you have never played Space Invaders, then quite frankly, you disgust me. It was one of the forerunners of modern video gaming and helped expand the video game industry from novelty to a global industry. When first released in the arcade, Space Invaders was extremely successful. Then after it had this success, it used its name value to launch the Atari into a household name after it was ported to their system. If I ask most people from my parents' generation, most will not play any games today, but the majority of them will all bring up positive memories of playing Space Invaders, Pac-Man and what they call tennis, aka Pong. So essentially, Space Invaders is one of the most iconic games of all time, cultural symbols of gaming which transcend generations around the world. So with all this hype around the franchise, let's look at the games from each Game Boy generation. So, let's start off with the first version on the Game Boy. Playing the game on the original hardware, it is essentially a black and white port of the arcade game, which is obviously superior to the famous Atari VCS version of the game as it's newer. Something interesting of note though, if you play this game on the SNES using the Super Game Boy, you can play this game in full colour, essentially delivering to you a fairly accurate arcade experience, which I think is a pretty nice feature for a Game Boy game. I do not think there is really much else to say about this one. You are literally just getting Space Invaders, but I suppose you are literally getting exactly what you asked for, which is always nice. Next, let's take a look at the Game Boy Color Space Invaders game. Now this is a completely different game to what was released in the arcade back in the day, but it still retains all the key Space Invaders mechanics. This game is obviously in full colour and very bright in presentation. This game differs from the original as the alien spacecrafts appear descending in various formations as you complete stages. If you shoot the mothership that hovers along the top of the screen, you now also receive R-Type like power-ups to help you clear up the screen even quicker. A lovely touch and aspect to mix up the gameplay was that this version of the game includes boss battles, who you face off against every 10 stages. I must admit, these old high score style games can get a little bit repetitive in the modern age, so this was a lovely addition. Now let's talk about the sound. The music is all very good and could stand toe to toe with any 8-bit Game Boy soundtrack. However, I do feel they did lose one element in this version of the game. They may have added great music, but for some reason they decided to remove the sound effects of ships descending towards the bottom of the screen. I always thought that sound effect was absolutely fantastic and created an enormous amount of tension as the ships descended towards you at a faster and faster pace. Thinking about it, that sound effect is absolutely terrifying! Nothing makes my heart beat faster and faster than that sound getting faster and faster, bringing you closer to your impending doom. Is Space Invaders the first ever survival horror game? I'll tell you what, I'll roll a short clip of the original version to remind you all just how terrifying it can get. Last but not least, let's look at the Game Boy Advance version. Wow, now this is Space Invaders on steroids. This version of the game features pumping music and much snazzier graphics than the previous colour version of the game. Mechanically though, the game itself plays pretty much identical to its predecessor. Everything is back. The varied enemies, the varied enemy formations, the power-ups and the boss battles. They are all back in here, only this time with arguably more impressive visuals and music. Also, an absolutely lovely touch they added to the game was to include the original arcade version of the game on the cartridge too. So if you prefer the terrifying sound effects of the original game, they are here to experience as well. So out of these 3 games, which ones are worth checking out? Well, all of them I suppose. None of them reinvent the wheel, but when it comes to games like Space Invaders, why the bloody hell would you need to do that anyway? The Game Boy Color and Advance versions of the game offer a new gaming experience while still paying homage to the arcade original by maintaining the original gameplay elements. Out of which of these 2 is better, I would say it is all completely down to personal preference. The reason being that it really would depend on whether you prefer 8-bit sounds and music or 16-bit style sounds and music. Personally, it depends on how I feel on the day regarding which one I prefer to play. I hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble about a few Space Invaders game. I am now off to learn even more about a boring weather balloon crash from the 1940s. Cheerio! Shoutouts to Jarrett Tolzian, Bricky's Lads, Mad 8 Productions, Andreas Larson, Peter Sidorn, Diego Pereira and all my other patrons. Thank you all for your fantastic support. It is very humbling. If you have yet to see my Patreon page, be sure to check it out. There are some pretty cool rewards for my supporters. If you are brand new and enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe button and be sure to click one of the annotations to see some of my other content. I hope you will join me again in my next review, in which will be taped in the United Kingdom. Yeah, I'm going home. Ta-ta and farewell.